Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Ridge Talk. I'm Justin, and with me today, once again, we have Sean and Daniel. And as always, feel free to like and or subscribe. I've got the information there on the bottom of the screen. That way, every time a new episode drops, you get notified. So after the previous episode, we did have one question come in, I think through the comment section on YouTube. So I'm just going to turn it over to Daniel here. I think the latter part of that question is one that we wanted to discuss a little bit.
Yeah. So we had we had someone comment on our last, so our last episode was called Questioning Our Assumptions. And we had The Brave Wolf is the name of that's the username, it's the handle he came on. But he said, hey, you seem to assume that there is a God and that he should be worshipped. Have you ever questioned that assumption? Now, here's the deal. The first part of the question, we actually answered in that episode. We actually said, this is one of our assumptions.
We were trying to say that where we're starting.
That's right.
With our messages that we're giving on Sundays is already taking into account that we believe that there is a God.
But it's a good question because we didn't question that assumption. We named that assumption.
It's true.
And so I think that's a worthwhile question for us to answer. Have any of us ever questioned that assumption? We were actually talking about the question earlier and just thought I wouldn't want to be a leader or follow a leader who never questioned their assumption about what they're doing. I think you said something like that earlier, Sean. I thought that was helpful.
For one thing, I think it's a credibility question. I wouldn't lend a lot of credibility to somebody who, so you get a pastor who says, I was born into a Christian family. I accepted Jesus when I was 3 years old, if they can remember that. And I've just been in this ever since. I went to, private Christian school growing up, and I went to Bible college, and now I've been preaching in church. And if that person ever was I've never really questioned the veracity of Christianity. I've never looked at anything. I've never read a philosophy book outside
I've just always believed it. Yeah.
Or everything's always kind of been from that bias. I think I would have a little bit of trouble with the credibility of that because I question that a lot in my own life. I was born into a Christian family. The Christian faith has been a part of my life and been really the community that I found myself in for all of my life. And so I try to get outside of that and examine some questions and really almost want to make sure that I'm credible as a church leader to say, I've done some investigating outside of this, and it's not just all confirmation bias.
Yeah, I think it was Socrates who, right before he was forced to commit suicide, they were saying recant, right? You're disturbing the youth of Athens. You need to recant what you're saying, and he's reportedly said, "Well, the unexamined life is not worth living."
Yeah.
And I think the unexamined faith is not worth believing. And I just really believe that. Similar to Sean, I grew up in a Christian household. I professed faith at a very young age. But I've lived a lot of life since then. And I've undergone a lot of examination over the years. I'll say this. There's a popular word that gets thrown around a lot. It's kind of a buzzword. And it's this idea of deconstructing. That everything in my life, it's been based around some, system that's put that on me or whatever, whether it's your family or church or whatever. And so the idea is we need to deconstruct that. I need to go all the way down to the core. I don't like that word. It's not something I'm really interested in doing. But the Christian version of that is reformation. Is that there's always we need to reform and critique and look at what we're doing. And I think that idea of semper reformanda, of always reforming, is a healthy idea. That we're always analyzing. We're always maybe not always skeptical, but we're at least engaging critically with. Is that true? Do I believe that? Why do I believe that? Yes, of course. I've absolutely had periods in my life where I've had to go through some of that. And I would say a lot of this, there are many things I learned in my youth in Christianity in one place or another that I'm like, I don't think that's right. I think there's something a little off about that. And so, I mean, I could give examples if I wanted to, but I don't want to take up,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like, Jesus is ministering to somebody, and he's like, hey, like, do you believe? And the man responds, I do believe, help my unbelief.
Yeah.
And I think that, everybody can identify with that in some way.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't think there's any real way for any of us to get completely out from underneath the bias of however we were raised, what our backgrounds are. Like, that's a part of life. So part of this is clearly subjective. We started that last podcast with a subjective view that God exists. He has revealed himself to human beings, that he came to earth in the flesh, in Jesus, on down the line. Like, that is a subjective view that we also claim is objectively true.
That's exactly right.
So it's really hard to parse that out to say, in some ways we do come to that in a subjective way, right? For me, it was I was raised in a Christian environment. It wasn't until later on in adulthood that I really spent much time questioning any of that, or really being exposed to anything beyond that message. Mm-hmm. So I can't do anything about the bias that exists there, other than as an adult who wants to try to continue to learn and to try to continue to be a credible presence as a church leader. I try to take opportunities to listen to other viewpoints, to understand them, to reflect on them, to match them up to what seems to make some sense, and to be open with, not saying that everything is a conversation of, am I going to throw my faith away? I have been there as well. But really at this point, it's more of, am I open to having some of my ideas reshaped, reformed?
Sean, I think what you're saying is such a crucial thing for people to really wrestle with, and I would hope adopt this idea that it's so important to recognize biases that you have.
Yeah.
Because if you can't even see your biases, then what are we doing? You're living an unexamined life, an unexamined faith, and you've lost credibility. If you cannot see, it's an iteration of Jesus. Hey, you've got a log in your eye. Why are you trying to remove the speck when you don't even see the log in your own eye? And I think that's what, if people who refuse to see their own biases, that's what they're doing. There's a log in their eye that they can't see. But the flip side of that is to say, and to realize that just because you have something that's a bias, that it's because you were raised that way or that's what you grew up in, that doesn't mean that the bias is necessarily incorrect or wrong.
Yeah.
It's just a recognition that that's a bias that I have because of my upbringing.
Yeah, and for me, it was like I became a Christian pastor. I was a pastor for almost 6 years. Stepped away from that for a period of a couple years. Just had some, in transitioning away from the church where I was working, determined that I didn't want to immediately go into another vocational ministry role. I had planned for that to be about a year process. That ended up being closer to 3.5 years. And in that, created a lot of space for me to distance myself from church culture. Am I just a practicing Christian because I have gone to church every week and then it was part of my job? Now there was zero expectation for me to be at a church, to really be engaging with my faith. And I went through a period of time where everything was open to me. And I did some questioning and really just kind of, in some ways, gave in to just the indulgence of self. I didn't have to be at church. I didn't have to get up early. Didn't have to be a part of that community. One of the biggest things that drew me back, and again, this is a subjective thing. This is not an objective observation, was I just did not find anything as compelling as Jesus. And ultimately, that's what drew me back. Like, I felt like I started down a path where I was building my own little kingdom of my own life. I got the best job that I'd ever had, where they told me, like, you can retire here and like be secure. I had all this stuff going for me, and I was plotting out like the things that I could buy. I really wanted a new motorcycle. I knew like I could get a cool car or something eventually, and different things. And once I started down that, I felt so empty. And it was, I was really just drawn back by Jesus and the idea that serving people and building his kingdom rather than my own little kingdom was the most compelling thing that I had still encountered in life.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I think that throughout 17 years in full-time ministry now, as well as years volunteering, just being involved in the church before that, I don't think I've met anybody who has said, I have a problem with Jesus. Anybody who's actually gone through and read the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and has observed the life of Jesus, his teachings, his ways, his lifestyle. I haven't met somebody who walked away and said, this guy's just completely off his rocker or whatever. So yeah, I'm in alignment with you in that yes, we do make assumptions sometimes, but when you examine your own life and the life of Jesus closely, it's really hard to turn away from that and not believe it.
I think that's right. And Sean, I think some of the things you're saying about, like, I'm a firm believer that even though we don't typically enjoy pain or suffering, that God uses those things. Pain is, I think, how head knowledge becomes heart knowledge. I really believe that. I think I was actually sharing some of my story with another pastor yesterday, and I got to the end of it, and he said, it's a wonder you're still in ministry. Like, just some of the pain and stuff you've gone through. And I'm like, listen, similar to you, like, but there was never any, like, to me, there was nothing ever more compelling. That like, this is what it's about. Another thing, part of it for me was not only was the God compelling and the idea of Christianity and his kingdom compelling, but the community with his people was always more compelling. Mm-hmm. It was just better than any other community. Mm-hmm. Not that they're better people than other people.
And boy, is it imperfect.
Is it imperfect.
Christian community is a mess.
Mess.
It's judgmental. It's all the things because it's still made up of people.
That's right.
Who struggle with sin and struggle with their own brokenness.
That's right.
That's such a funny statement to hear you say, like, Christian community was, because I bet you a lot of people would go, that does not feel like the safest community to be in.
That's right.
And I understand that too. Like, unfortunately, Christian community doesn't cure all of the ills that we see in human beings.
My deepest hurts are also at the hands of Christian community.
Mine as well.
That's exactly right. And so, anyways, I just think that's interesting. I've also, with regard to the guy's question, I've spent a lot of time looking at, there is no proof of God. You can't prove the existence of God, but you can look at evidence and get to a place of, like, beyond reasonable doubt, I think. And it's just always been more compelling. The evidence for God. Yes, I've questioned it and gone down deep rabbit holes. And to me, the evidence is always brought back to a creator God. And so, anyways.
Yeah. So then this has been a good discussion.
I think so.
So we've been in this message series on counter formation for a while now. And this past, or I guess when this episode releases, it will have been 2 Sundays ago, I did the message on digital distraction versus resting in God. All in all, we have been receiving a lot of positive feedback on the series, but we haven't been receiving any questions. So I share that to say, if you all do have any questions, again, you're welcome to share those with us. We'd be happy to talk through it. I think just with the amount of time we have left here for this episode, I just wanted to throw out the question. It's currently April. The end of the school year is quickly coming upon us. Summer's right around the corner. What are you guys looking forward to? What are you excited about in ministry? What's coming up in the near future that you're like, man, I'm just really excited about this thing?
I'm excited about all of it. No, did you have something, Sean?
I mentioned a couple weeks ago our mission trip to Nicaragua is coming up in June, which is exciting. That's been good. We are really just trying to make some strides in building deeper relationships with some of our ministry and missions partners here locally as well. Yeah. So we've got some opportunities there. I will be attending a foster care summit at May 3rd. I don't remember when this episode's coming out. It's either coming up when you see this or it will have happened because we're filming ahead of time. But that's exciting. And then I'm actually going to be leading worship for a conference for foster and adoptive parents the following day, and getting to spend some time with people who are living that day in, day out. So those are some things I'm definitely excited about.
Have you been practicing your Spanish for the Nicaragua trip?
I have been, yeah. And we have Zoom calls about once a month with the team there, and that's been a refresher for that. But I know I'm anticipating the mental exhaustion once I hit the ground, and I've lost so much vocabulary in the last 10 years. But
for those who may forget, Sean is bilingual for the most part. He did get you had a degree in Spanish?
Mm-hmm. I did.
So he's fairly fluent in speaking Spanish. For me, I'm excited for the baptism service that we have coming up in June.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite. If you can have a favorite service of the year, I don't know. I think that's my favorite.
Yeah. So last year, I was on a 3-month sabbatical during when you guys had the baptism service. So I was actually out of the country when you all had the baptism service. So I did look at pictures and things like that on the tail end of it, but I didn't get to be a part of it. And that is something that I missed, because it is something that is like a highlight of the ministry year. When you see people who are publicly demonstrating that they have died to sin, been raised to life in Christ, and doing it outside, having a baptism service outdoors where instead of having 2 services, we have 1 service and everybody's there and it's a big celebration. That's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. I started tearing up when you were talking about last year, because I just started remembering some of the really powerful stories that people shared. Man.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
So that's June 9th, I think.
Yeah, a lot of exciting things coming up in the life of the church. And so I'm excited about all of them. I every year, I like the different rhythms we have in teaching, and one of the rhythms I've come to enjoy is heading through the Psalms every summer. And so I'm extra excited about just diving back into those, and the rhythm changes a little bit with regard to summer, and so it's a nice kind of way to navigate through that time, that season.
Yeah. Hey, one last thing I want to mention is we have gotten some nice feedback from people who listen to or watch Ridge Talk. And we were discussing before this started, just like, what do we feel like the reach we have is? Like, we're not trying to get followers or post numbers, but we do just want to know that this intentional thing that we're taking time to do is meaningful and valuable and accomplishing something in helping people grow in their faith. So for those of you who have shared feedback with us, we really do appreciate that. I know for myself that a couple of times where we've gotten feedback about Ridge Talk, I've come in on some hard days, and it was so nice to open up an email and see some encouragement along with that. So thank you for that. And if you just have other people that you want to share the podcast with, we would definitely encourage you to do that.
Yeah, and if you have questions outside of the current message series, overall questions about God, Jesus, ministry, you can feel free to share those with us. We'd be happy to answer questions here during the podcast. So I think that's all we have here for this episode today. Did you have anything else you wanted to share, Daniel?
Nope, I'm good. This has been a great conversation, though. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. So, as always, feel free to like and subscribe. We have the information there on the bottom of the screen. And as Sean indicated, feel free to send positive feedback. Feel free to send questions.
Feel free to send negative feedback.
That's fine.
I was going to say, don't feel free. Yeah, don't feel free to send negative feedback.
Feel a little bit of pushback.
But we look forward to seeing you all again in our next episode.